Travis Walton was overcome by a primal wave of fear, an emotion so intense it gripped his entire body, locking him in place. The glow from the craft above pulsed, unnatural and hypnotic, yet somehow terrifying in its silence. His instincts screamed at him to run. Inexplicably, he found himself continually drawn closer to the light. It was 1975, and Travis and a crew of his loggers had been finishing up from a routine day of work. When the craft appeared out of nowhere, what would happen next is something that nobody could have predicted. And as Travis found himself closer to the light, everything went black, and it wasn't until 5 agonizing days later that he reappeared. Walton's encounter was witnessed by several people and to this day has never been explained. His disappearance, along with many others throughout the course of history, has created a cultural obsession around UFOs. Today we're diving not just into Travis Walton's chilling disappearance, but the history and mystery that is UFOs. We're going to look at some famous cases of abductions, discoveries, and cover-ups. From ancient times to the present, we're going to explore some of the most famous, mysterious, and frightening encounters in history, and also try to explain our cultural obsession with aliens and UFOs. But first, let's get back to Travis Walton's disappearance. His disappearance sent shockwaves through the entire small town of Snowflake, Arizona. His co-workers who had witnessed the strange craft and its sudden vanishing were thrown into a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and fear. Accused of murder, interrogated by law enforcement, and subjected to polygraph tests, their lives were upended by a night that we'll never forget. But the nightmare only intensified when Travis Walton reappeared disoriented, terrified, and with a story that defies all human logic. When Travis finally told his tale, he described waking up in what he first thought was a hospital, only to realize that the beings surrounding him were far from human. They were small, with large heads and enormous eyes. What followed was an experience of confusion, terror, and desperation for escape. He recounted being examined on what he believed to be an alien craft, for somehow finding himself back on Earth. Walton's story became one of the most famous and hotly debated UFO abductions in history. Skeptics and believers alike have dissected every possible detail, with many of Walton's co-workers standing by their version of events. While critics accuse Walton of fabricating the entire ordeal, others believe him wholeheartedly. Yet decades later, no matter what side you're on, his story endures and people are obsessed with it. And today, it's not just about Walton's harrowing experience, but it is part of a bigger and larger pattern of UFO encounters that continues to challenge our understanding of what truly lies beyond the stars. All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Excited to be here today. We're going to talk about UFO history. I do have a pretty nasty cold, so I apologize if I sound funny today. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit that button. It really helps the channel. Please share the show. If someone out there was interested in this stuff, tell them about it. Lastly, drop a comment at the end of this episode. I'm really curious to see if any of you have had your own UFO experiences. I will share one of mine later on in the episode, and I hope you find it interesting. Okay, so to start off this story, we got to go far back in time as possible, because UFOs isn't something that has been invented since. So to start the story, we got to go as far back as possible, almost as long as humans have gazed into the stars or skies. We've been confronted with the unknown, like what lies beyond. And that question hasn't got any smaller as every year with new discoveries, it seems like our universe keeps getting bigger and bigger. From the strange lights that appear and move in unnatural ways reported on the news, to legends of divine vehicles driven through the heavens in ancient times who brought with them destruction, chaos, or good fortune, depending on who you were. So long before we had any modern sightings like Travis Walton or the Roswell encounters, our ancient civilizations were reporting that UFOs were a common occurrence. There's even pictures of them as far back as thousands of years ago. One of the most intriguing examples comes from the ancient India. There's a character, or I don't know if you would call them a god, but Vimanas. He's described in ancient Hindu texts as basically being a little dude that has flying vehicles and extraordinary capabilities. In the Mahabharata, and Ramiana, these Vimanas are said to traverse not only skies but also outer space, capable of traveling vast distances in an instant. So these chariots in the sky, our Vimanas, are quite famous during that time, and one of the most talked about examples, Ravana's Pushpaka Vimana, which is a chariot that is described as an advanced technological marvel. Scholars and UFO theorists alike have often pondered whether these descriptions could be based on actual flying machines or potentially extraterrestrial technology witnessed by early civilizations. So an interesting thing that I see in these stories, and you'll see time and time again, is the description of these objects is that outside of the fact that they're flying, which is crazy back then to somebody, that outside of a bird, right? They're not seeing machines. But one of the things that always sticks out, it's the way that these things move from point A to point B to point C, and like instantaneously in ways that just can't be comprehended by our human brains. In ways that if we probably moved, we would be turned into some kind of jelly like the people in the Titan sub. There's more accounts as you move forward into history. Ancient texts like Samarangana Sutradhara, which is a Sanskrit work on architecture, go so far as to outline the technical specifications of these Vimanas. The treatise, the Sanskrit work, describes the construction of the Vimanas, the materials used, and even their propulsion mechanisms, going through details that seem shockingly advanced for the time. Time frame of the Vimanas is seen to be happening around 1500 to 1200 BC, which is one of the earliest ancient references to flying machines. This could also be because this is at the beginning of when we're recording text for the first time. It's not like every civilization on Earth was writing stuff down back then. So the fact that we get a little bit of insight from this culture, seriously, it blows my mind, because I think this is just one of those things that cements into me personally that I don't necessarily believe there's little green men, but I do believe that people see these things, and I do believe that they defy logic. However, given that they were an ancient civilization, we also have to take into account that we're taking a lot of leeway in interpreting their texts and also what they were trying to convey. Hey, it's possible that we're just wrong about all of it. And the question is also unavoidable. Could the writers of these texts been inspired by not only actual encounters with flying craft, but something like psychedelics? Or were these descriptions that they were giving and all of these things just meant to be metaphors for divine power, or be something symbolic of gods that has dominion over earth and sky? I don't know, because there's a real human propensity to find meaning in things no matter what we look at, whether it's religion or theology. However, let's move forward to another culture thousands of miles away in Peru. And you have something called the Nazca Lines, which is a striking example of enormous geoglyphs that are carved into the desert over 2,000 years ago. They depict animals of geometric shapes and even what some believe would be representations of astronauts and extraterrestrial beings. The sheer scale of these designs is best appreciated from the sky, which leads to a ton of speculation because they didn't have planes. Seriously, if you're looking at the ground at the Nazca Lines, you see nothing. And the only way to recognize these giant runway-looking structures, these giant animals, alien-type creatures carved into the ground, is from thousands of feet in the air. So how could an ancient civilization, actually, I'm going to go back. It wasn't hard probably for them to build it. It was big. But why would they build something that they would never be able to see? And speculation from scientists and the ancient alien communities and lakes are like pretty much come up with the theory that they were trying to communicate with creatures or beings flying overhead. The Nazca Lines is seriously one of the biggest rabbit holes I hope to go into on this show one day, because it really does defy logic. It's hard to imagine building any kind of structure if you're completely terrestrial, unable to get up into the sky, that could only be viewed from the sky. Even to the point of like, how do they know that they were even making it right if they had no way to pop a drone up and take a look at these suckers? Anyhow, really interesting feature that was created in Peru. And it's not like they're the only ancient civilization that's out there saying they're seeing astronauts and green men. You have mysteries coming from ancient Egyptian and Babylonian cultures, where the Thule papyrus describes mysterious fiery discs in the sky, burning brighter than the sun, and basically being described as something divine. While Babylonian legends recount stories of gods who flew in great winged chariots. Even the Bible has its share of strange aerial phenomenon, including the book of Ezekiel, where the prophet describes a vision of a flying craft, which is often interpreted by many modern theorists as a UFO sighting. These ancient accounts scattered across different times and cultures paint a picture of a world that was continually fascinated and perhaps haunted by the sky's mysteries. And even more unbelievable is the fact that these cultures existed thousands of miles from each other during different time periods, and they're all coming up with the same thing. Just like today, when you see the huge list of, I'm going to say verified UFO sightings, not like, there's a way bigger list of hoaxes. There's no doubt in my mind that the fucking UFO field is full of grifters. And it's been since the start of time, because so many people associate UFOs to like a divine power, aliens, something bigger than humans. So you always get grifters trying to take money out of people. But there seems to be a very clear link between all these kind of verified and historical sightings describing the same type of light balls in the sky, alien craft moving crazy. That hasn't changed for thousands of years, which it makes me think we suck as humans if we haven't invented them yet. So in addition to the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Vimanas from India, the Nazca Lines, you have so many more stories that we're not going to cover them all today, but I'll just highlight a few key things that I think not only stick in my mind, but they're just kind of cement the idea into my head that there's a huge consistency over thousands of years of what people are seeing, and doesn't seem to be something that is tied culturally to one culture or religion. Another example is in Puma, Punku, a vast stone complex located in the highlands of Bolivia. The precision with which this thing was built has baffled archaeologists for decades. Some of the stones weigh upwards of 130 tons and fit together like puzzle pieces. There's no mortar, and it creates the impression of a technology-driven construction method. Modern machinery would struggle to achieve such precision, leading to some theorists to speculate that ancient civilizations either had technology we can't comprehend, or were getting help from some type of extraterrestrial civilization. And there's a whole rabbit hole on extraterrestrial civilizations out there. Like one of the more interesting ones, I don't buy into this, but it's the ancient aliens theory where you have Enki and Alil coming from like the planet Nibiru to seed mankind for the purpose of harvesting gold. Really interesting. And it's got a lot of like entertainment value, but there's also a lot of like, when you read into that theory and you really want to start going down the rabbit hole of ancient aliens, there's so much, I want to say bad information out there. I would say biased information. People just want it to be true, and they interpret scientific papers how they want to, or to fit their narrative. So I haven't bought into any of it yet, but man, it sure is fun. So this ancient civilization in Bolivia, we don't know how it's built. Another intriguing site is one that's controversial these days, which is Gobekli Tepe in Turkey. And this ancient structure, which was built likely over 12,000 years ago, long before human civilization was supposed to have started. Figure that out. This is a major challenge to our understanding of ancient history. Because during this time, for years, we thought that humans were still in the farming and settling stage, yet somehow they're building this massive monument in Turkey long before other civilizations were supposed to still be in that kind of hunter-gatherer stage. So yeah, we weren't even farming. And whether or not humans built that is actually a little bit of a controversy. Some people think, again, this is an example of there was no way people were able to either build that back then, so we must have had some external help from extraterrestrials, or the more likely explanation is we're starting to see pop up is that maybe humans were just more advanced than we gave them credit for back then. I've seen a lot of theories around Gobekli Tepe, from one of them being that humans didn't need to be that civilized and advanced back then because wildlife and food was so plentiful. So they were just able to build this giant monument because they had the time and energy, and that's just what humans do. Another one is that there's the younger Dryas impact theory, essentially that humans were like a budding civilizations all over the planet, and a large asteroid essentially hits the poles, melts a bunch of water, causes a global catastrophe, and kind of clears out whatever was budding of human civilization. So people were getting to similar like the Egyptians, getting up there to really building structures, having cities and all these things. And then in an instant, it was all wiped out. And we don't see the resurgence of civilization until a few thousand years later again. The inability to explain how humans could have possibly built a site like this just seems to go again into this whole ancient aliens theory where humans didn't do it. They figure that we must have had some help or somebody else did it, which is really interesting. I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Gobekli Tepe thing. I'll tell you the one thing about it though that you should keep your eye on is the fact that the World Economic Forum has taken quite a bit of interest in the site itself. And it's fairly controversial as to what their intentions are, because there's a lot of people that think that there may be an attempt to suppress information regarding to Gobekli Tepe, because it does reveal something about human history that we don't know, whether it's extraterrestrial or it's just such a challenge to the mainstream theories on human evolution that Klaus Schwab wants to take ownership of it and be the gatekeeper. Another super interesting thing is the Dogon people of West Africa. They have this knowledge of the Sirius star system that goes back as long as they've existed. However, modern astronomers have only discovered the Sirius star sometime in the 20th century. The Dogon describe the companion star to Sirius, what they call Sirius B, invisible and naked to the eye, but somehow they knew about it and passed down through the oral history. It was just common knowledge that the Sirius star and Sirius B both existed. And they're doing this with no use of modern telescopes. They don't have Google or ChatGPT, and they certainly didn't have access to spaceships. It really begs the question of how could they discover something that would have been invisible to them, that we needed radio telescopes to figure out was there, and a bunch of Newtonian math. I don't know. That one boggles my mind. They have a strong oral history that attributes this knowledge to visitors from the sky, which they call Namo. And these Namo shared their astronomical insights with the Dogon thousands of years ago, giving them the insight that no other humans had at that time. Anyhow, as you move forward through time, the one thing that's never changed, we're going back thousands of years, is our fascination with this. If you go through just about any era in history where we have some kind of record of it, there's reports of UFOs. There's drawings of UFOs, there's paintings, there's ancient stories, you name it, there's no getting away from it. And whether or not we're talking about the Vimanas of India, the Nazca Lines, or the Thule papyrus, the consistent presence of these mysteries across cultures suggests that something, whether it's divine, extraterrestrial, or otherwise, has always been there in front of us, but just out of reach. It's no wonder we're obsessed with it, and I don't think that obsession will ever go away until one of these magical crafts lands and the little green guy comes out and shakes hands with the United States of America's president. I really don't see it ending until then, because obsession is going to get so much worse, so much fucking worse, because it's so easy not only to fake UFO sightings today, it's so easy to doctor images, it's so easy to corroborating witnesses online. Everything about pulling off a fake UFO sighting has just gotten exponentially easier. And I know there's always the other argument, our expectations are higher now because we expect that we're going to want to see high quality video, we're going to want to see all the stuff. I don't know if people really expect that. I go on the Reddit groups and chat groups and I look in there, people will believe anything. And we haven't necessarily gotten better at sussing out what's fake and what's real. Especially I was thinking of drones the other day. They put in these light shows on with drones and things like that. And if you watch most modern day drones, if they're just all you were seeing was a light and it's black sky behind it, it's going to look like a ball of light dancing around the sky in some like crazy UFO like way. If you guys get a second, jump on over to the YouTube channel at Mysteries and Backstories, and in the community tab, you're going to find a poll. And in that poll, I'm trying to get an idea of what kind of stories you guys want to hear more of. So please go toss your vote in there. The one thing that's really interesting when it comes to not only ancient UFOs, just let's say aliens in general, is our obsession as to what their intentions are. Like we could possibly understand. I don't think we can, but you constantly hear people saying things like, oh, they're coming and they're treating essentially humans like a zoo. And it's called the zoo theory. Aliens are observing us from a distance, purposely not interfering with us and just watching us the same way a biologist might watch wildlife in nature. Is it possible? Yeah, of course it's possible. And then you have theories that we are them and they are us. So like they're just us from the future coming back to see us in something like time machine. I've heard theories that these things are actually interdimensional travelers as opposed to extraterrestrial, but they're not even from this universe. And another one I hear sometimes is that the UFOs aren't actually, there's nothing alive inside of them. They're like drones or bots that have been sent here by a civilization somewhere else. Maybe they're doing recon work. Yeah, they're all pretty interesting. I have a darker theory though that I like to think that I think could be true sometimes, and that's that these things are more like a remnant drone. So they could be like a drone or something like that of either a civilization that sent them here with the intention of finding out more about us, and their plans never came to fruition and they don't exist anymore, or that ancient humans were the leftovers. They left the planet 100,000, 300,000, 500,000 years ago, God knows, and we're the rejects that never got off the planet. And those drones are just some kind of like remnants that are like on some auto repeat sequence that we'll never understand because they're so far past our technology. Like if something's able to warp space and time, for example, to travel through dimensions, it's going to take a lot of years and a lot of big computers for us to understand that. And I think I'll be long gone. So I don't hold out a lot of hope I'll ever know. But these obsessions, anyhow, didn't just end with ancient history. They've moved forward into, like you said, the Travis Walton story. And also the most famous one I can think of is the Roswell Incident. And I think it's so famous for a couple of reasons. And we're going to get into that because it very well could just be much more human caused than alien caused, but we'll never know. So as the ancient mysteries of Vimanas receded into history, the modern era of UFOs began to peak again around the summer of 1947 with an event that changed the world's fascination with the skies forever, the Roswell Incident. So it was July when something crashed near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Military personnel quickly arrived to the scene. Initially, the U.S. Army Air Force released a statement claiming that they had recovered a flying disc, but within days, they walked back that story and retracted it, replacing it by a now infamous explanation that it was merely a weather balloon. This rapid reversal planted the seeds of suspicion and speculation. Witnesses reported seeing strange debris with unusual markings, and some even claimed they saw alien bodies being recovered by the military. Roswell quickly became synonymous with UFO cover-ups and fueled an entire generation of conspiracy theories, despite official explanations that debris was from Project Mogul, a classified military operation involving high-altitude balloons designed to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. Roswell remains the most famous UFO incident in history. Years later, in the 1990s, the US government admitted that disinformation and propaganda campaigns were being used during the Cold War, and this included UFO-related incidents. While the official line was that these were natural or man-made phenomenon, it's clear that certain aspects of the UFO craze were manipulated to serve broader national security interests. In fact, the CIA has acknowledged many UFO sightings in the 1950s were linked to secret military aircraft tests. These admissions, while not directly proving alien encounters, only deepened public skepticism towards official explanations, stoking further curiosity about what was truly happening in the skies above. So following the Roswell incidents, UFOs were catapulted into the mainstream consciousness. It was like media hype course 101. People were freaking out. I think, seriously, I wonder if the Roswell UFO incident didn't give media their first taste of like absolute sensationalism. So one thing I want to talk about with the whole Roswell UFO crash, from what I can see, is that I'm skeptical that this was ever any kind of cover up. I've looked into this, and from what I can say is the military didn't really ever say that a flying UFO crashed. My read of it is that they described the weather balloon as having like a disc shape, and the media ran with that. And then they did try to backtrack it to quash down like the public scrutiny. But you have that alongside the legitimate like secret testing of aircraft at that time. So around the time of Roswell, this Project Mogul thing that was happening was a project aimed at detecting kind of nuclear tests by using high altitude balloons equipped with sensitive microphones. The wreckage found at Roswell was later revealed to be part of this project, but there's some crazy theories that one of the ones that people said I read on the internet is that there was some kind of flying disc that was dropped in Roswell by the Soviets, and in that flying disc, what was put in there was actually deformed children that were a result, or the Russians had captured as part of all the Auschwitz type experiments that were going on in World War II. And so they took some of these genetically modified, deformed children, whether or not they were killed and then put in the thing or they died upon impact, but it was meant to essentially cause chaos and to sow chaos and confusion in the United States, essentially to rile the public up and erode their trust in the government. I don't know. It's a pretty dark theory to think about, but it is definitely not out of the realm of possibility, because that is like a minuscule drop in the water of how cruel just about every government was being around that time in the world in terms of genetic testing drugs on people, doing all kinds of like terrible crap. So yeah, it could have happened. I hope not, man. The important or the implication of Roswell and why it is so important in UFO history is because it served to teach us, one, that our government realized that they can use the UFO thing to test propaganda and also to influence the public. And on top of that, they really honed in on the propaganda to discredit people that did believe in aliens, because as people got closer to the truth, under the guise of national security, the government of the United States would have disinformation and discrediting campaigns against people, so that they led the public to essentially ostracize anybody that thought UFOs are real. Oh, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a nut. And they went even further than that to, like in the case of Paul Benowitz, which you got to check out that episode on my channel if you haven't seen it. But Richard Doty, like in the U.S. Air Force Investigative Service, literally found a guy that was near one of the bases where they were testing experimental aircraft who had been witnessing them, and it was reporting on it and was really concerned about it. So rather than just tell him like, hey, you can't say anything, they led him to believe that what he was seeing was UFOs through a very controlled disinformation campaign intended and directed at him to discredit him. And to the point where it destroyed this guy's life, because he literally for years thought he was the only person that knew that there was going to be some kind of secret alien invasion, and he was trying to warn people, and of course everybody just is laughing at him. It's not until years later that some guys from the Air Force Office of Investigations, Richard Doty, comes out and says that, yeah, all this crazy shit this guy was always ranting about was actually true. He was seeing this stuff, and we convinced him he was crazy and convinced everyone in his life that he was crazy just to cover up our secret. So nice. So another famous story that moves on after Roswell, this is an interesting one because the UFO abduction part of UFOs and that history is relatively new. I don't see a lot of reference to UFO abductions in ancient texts, but Around 1961, a new type of encounter grabs headlines: the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. The Hills where they were driving through rural New Hampshire when they claimed they were followed by a bright, erratic light. The couple reported experiencing missing time, strange dreams, and vivid memories of being examined by alien beings aboard a spacecraft. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction case was the first widely publicized account of alien abduction, and it introduced a now familiar elements that we know in alien abductions, including telepathy. The aliens are talking to us through our brains and minds, that they're doing medical examinations, and the loss of time. Under hypnosis, both Betty and Barney described their abduction in disturbing details. Their story was met by skepticism by some, but became a foundation for more modern alien abduction lore. The Hills experience wasn't just a flash in a pan. It sparked an entire wave of alien abduction claims that continues to this day, and it also raised serious questions about what people were really experiencing. For Betty and Barney, the encounter led to a long-lasting emotional turmoil. Barney in particular suffered from recurring nightmares and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Betty became a prominent figure in the UFO circles, advocating for abductees and trying to convince the public like this is real and we're not crazy. The story, like the Roswell Incident, created a ripple effect in popular culture and numerous scientific investigations into their abduction. This story is impactful, but obviously it raises a lot of doubts because both the Roswell Incident and the Hill abduction set the stage for a lot of our modern UFO interest, but it's also a little too closely related to the government's own manipulation of UFO narratives, the timeline of like Cold War and secret testing, and the birth of programs such as MK Ultra, where people are being fed psychedelics and they're getting into mind control, all this crazy human experiments. So, though famous, it also is a departure from like the entire history of UFO sightings, and also starts to get into the sensational. You've heard so many stories of alien abductees, like Whitley Strieber is a common example. He's the guy that, I think he was the first one to say that they did the anal probing on him, which whether or not it's true, I don't know. But again, it becomes like a pop culture meme. You see it in South Park where they're making fun of him. You also see stories about, I want to say Stan Romanek. He's this guy talking about his alien wife and aliens want to have sex with him. It gets into the really crazy stuff, which I'm super skeptical about. Super skeptical, because the one thing that's common in all of these abduction stories is that they're doing medical testing. And to me, that just seems, man, one thing the CIA kind of definitely learned, and the Germans after World War II, is that with the right mixture of drugs, you can put someone into a hallucinogenic state and a suggestive state where, let's say we definitely know they're covering out human experiments. Then if you wanted to grab people and pick them up off the street and do testing on them, which kind of seems like what these people are reporting, really, if you break it down, like their doctors are testing on them, there's operations being done, super confused during it, they're out of it, people are talking to them through their brains, and it starts to make me wonder, is this just another case of, it's not actually aliens picking up, it's guys in white lab coats and they're given a cocktail of drugs, and this is the shared hallucination that's created. Again, the government's been very clear that their intention was, and has been for a long time, to use kind of the alien propaganda to discredit people and to be a cover for secret programs. I don't know. Call me crazy, but don't call me late for breakfast. So, as time progressed in the more modern times, I don't see a lot of credible alien abduction stories. I see a lot of really interesting ones, but not a single one ever convinced me. And if anything, I've only seen ones get debunked more and more. Like the Ariel School UFO one. Again, there's a story of aliens come down in Africa. For years, people swore that there was like 20 kids see these things. They get out and have a conversation about, you got to protect your planet. You got to do all these like super hippie things. if you want to be around and join the intergalactic race. I'm pretty sure in more modern times, people have dug into that. A few of the kids are like, no, we were coached to say that. Alien abductions just seems to be the one that I always get hung up on because it just becomes so sensational. I feel like it detracts from the insanely incredible thing that's actually in front of us, which is these completely unexplainable balls of light dancing around the sky that defy all humanly logic. But unfortunately, finding these answers out is just becoming more and more difficult. Not only because of all the muddied water from the grifters and bullshit theories out there, from people willing to do hoaxes on like crop circles and fill the internet full of all this, I want to say hippy dippy bullcrap around aliens. You also are competing with government secrecy and cover-ups. So it's abundantly clear that throughout history, different governments have encountered or have encounters with these UFOs. We've seen it in the news in the last couple of years where the US had these UFOs flying over. I guess they were weather balloons or Chinese spy balloons, but you've seen it forever that the government does have involvement. There's stories of these things coming down and shutting down nuclear test sites. And the one thing that's always surrounding that is that they want to be tight-lipped about the encounters with these things. And it's usually because it involves some kind of either secret technology or national security, which in itself is an indicator to me that seems something military to military going on. So it's really getting hard to tell what's real and what's not. But the other element that deepens this, again, like I said, is the government secrecy, because you've had people coming out, they were like General from Canada came out, he's saying, we've always seen these things and aliens have been around. There is an intergalactic race and we are covering it up because that's what they want. The government's suppressing information. They know aliens exist. They know how these craft work. They even have recovered some of them, maybe even alien bodies. And because of that, they're always going to protect this information. They've seen, and we've seen the frenzy that the public can get into over things like Roswell. So could it be the case that a government does know and they just don't want to release the information to avoid some kind of public panic? Maybe we are part of some intergalactic federation and we are being subjugated, and telling us would again cause chaos and panic, and our government doesn't want that. But over the years, regardless, the pattern of secrecy and disinformation repeats itself, which has taken what could be isolated incidents and giving them legs that they didn't need to have, because as soon as people knew that the government could lie to them, everything became a UFO. And every explanation is to, like, even when the government comes out and is telling you, like, dude, it's a fucking weather balloon, you've got just as many people lining up to be like, yeah, we don't believe you. And rightfully, but the clearest example I can think of is Project Blue Book. So the seeds of mistrust are there and it's growing, and I don't think it's getting any better. It seems like even when the government is truthful nowadays, people don't believe them. And there was a hope quite a few times, like Project Blue Book between 1952 and 1969 was a collection of 12,000 reports of UFO sightings. Most of these cases were dismissed as misidentified weather phenomena. However, over 700 cases remained unsolved. So many people thought that was going to be the thing that cracked open the UFO theory or give us the answers that we needed. But again, nothing came of it. They concluded that these things had no relevance to national security or safety and basically dismissed the thing. And this seems to be the theme that we see kind of time and time again. Like, you've seen the UFO disclosure stuff that's come out in the last couple of years, which seems like, if anything, more of a distraction because they gave us nothing in it. And it was a lot of BS. And for them to say that there's no safety issue makes no sense to me. If these things are flying anywhere that airplanes fly, it's a safety issue. Things like Area 51, which is a secret Air Force facility in Nevada, it becomes another example of the government's refusal to share what they know about UFOs. Everyone thinks that if there is alien bodies or UFOs, they're somewhere down either on this base and it's being protected by the military, but it seems more likely than not that it's probably just secret aircraft. And the one thing I do firmly believe is that, yeah, likely if there was information that secret, they're never going to tell you. And it's either with a private company that you'll never know about, that the government has set up, or it's just legislated in law that this is top national security and we're going to keep people in the dark at all costs. But for those that have been directly involved in UFO sightings, the cultural impacts of this secrecy have life-altering consequences. But I think of Bob Lazar as an example. I don't know if I buy this guy's story. The story of Bob Lazar, he worked at, I want to say Area S3, but he worked like one of the secret bases in Nevada. He develops this rocket car, which people liked. They invite him to come work on a few projects as a physicist. And while doing that, he witnesses what he believes is a UFO using anti-gravity technology. And he's able to corroborate a few facts about his employment there. But there's also equally a lot of things working against him. There's no record of his schooling. He does report very advanced physics, which other physicists say, hey, this guy's legit. But also the guy got busted for running a brothel. Again, it's like one of those things. We rarely have a really good, credible UFO witness, and I think that's on purpose. Well, he is working at one of these things, and so he does try to tell people eventually, because he thinks one day he's at work, he finds out his wife's having an affair, and the first thing that goes through his mind is that he's going to lose his security clearance, because when you have top secret security clearance, anything that goes wrong in your personal life, they're going to pull your clearance, because you might become more subject to falling into addiction, mental health issues, all these things that can make you more susceptible to leaking information. But when his security clearance is pulled, slowly he becomes the target, according to him, of the government trying to discredit him so that whatever he's telling people, nobody will believe. And then George Knapp, a reporter from down that way, takes up his story, and there's a whole documentary about this guy. Again, he's such a compelling story, such an interesting listen to see what he says about aliens and what he saw at Area 51. But it's not a single thing that he said can really be corroborated enough to be like, yeah, like that happened. I don't know. Another example of this secrecy kind of messing up people's life is Morris K. Jessup, who's a scientist and a UFO researcher. And he became deeply involved with investigating the Philadelphia experiment. The rumor was that this project was using actual tech from alien technology, like anti-gravity tech. And shortly after his work, he's found dead in his car from carbon monoxide poisoning. The officials have ruled it a suicide, but many believe that his death was linked to his involvement with UFO research, a fate that befell other investigators who probed too deeply into these government secrets. Now, the Philadelphia experiment is famous for messing with this UFO technology, and they accidentally made an entire warship disappear in front of thousands of witnesses. Everyone's just gone and it reappears somewhere else. But again, Morris dug a little bit too deep into this. Maybe he was going to expose something and he lost his life. People like Travis Walton, for example, he and his friends were, for a long time after the abduction, treated like criminals. They were accused, his friends were accused of murders. He's being accused of being like a hoaxer. Same thing with Betty and Barney Hill. They're ridiculed and subjected to intense scrutiny, all to the point where it's hard to make the argument that this didn't severely negatively impact their lives. This pattern of secrecy breeds suspicion, not just about agencies that are involved, but about anybody that witnesses something. Many now believe that the government knows far more than they're letting on, but perhaps UFOs aren't just some misunderstood natural phenomenon, but many people take it as a cover-up of the existence of the extraterrestrial beings. However, as always, the government denies it's fueling this mystery anymore. In the end, a combination of official investigations like Project Blue Book, the ongoing secrecy around places like Area 51, has created a climate of uncertainty around UFOs, unknown aircraft in general in the sky, to the point where you could just say it's muddied the waters, almost like it was on purpose, wasn't it all along? Think about that. I'm just going to leave you with that for a second. Seems like a great way to control information. And it's also a common propaganda and intelligence technique to, the truth is going to get out. You just got to muddy the water with other stuff. So yeah, I just want to touch on the abduction piece and like the government's involvement, because I don't know, I wanted to separate the abductions a little bit from the other part of this episode, because I really, again, I think these are two different phenomenon. If anything, I see alien abductions as a fairly recent development in history, and it seems to be more of a cultural phenomenon. There's actually an interesting theory on the hallucination or the presence of thinking you've had an alien abduction is actually a common shared hallucination that people have. It's a suppressed trauma of like assault, abduction, these types of things. I think what I'm trying to say is that alien abductions became a cultural meme after Betty and Barney Hill were abducted. And it may have been on purpose. It may have been pushed by the military, again, as a part of all the testing that they were going and taking on during that time. I'd like to know if you seriously drop another comment if you can. I want to know what your thoughts are. Like, do you believe in the alien abductions? Do you see it like I do? Do you think that the UFO UAP phenomenon is in any way, shape, or form related to the alien abductions? Let's move back to just the regular old UFO UAPs. I covered a story that took place in 1978, and it was a pilot named Frederick Valentich. He took off from Melbourne, Australia, flying over something called the Bass Strait. The weather was clear. He was a fairly experienced pilot, though he didn't have, it's rumored that he may have been not the best at following safety directions, but that's speculation. Anyhow, the weather's clear. He's about 45 minutes into his flight when he radios Melbourne's traffic control, and he says, "Hey, I'm seeing like these bright lights. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." Despite being assured by the tower that there was no other aircraft in the vicinity, he was adamant that something was up there with him. There was corroborating witnesses on the ground that took some sketchy photos. Again, they don't really support this case. People will tell you they do. But the one thing that happens after is his radio contact is abruptly cut off, and despite 30, 40 years passing, there's never been a single sign of his aircraft being found again. So there's a lot of explanations, like he may have just crashed into the ocean, he was trying to hoax, trying to disappear himself. But the main one that comes up and up again is that he encountered a UFO and essentially vanished into thin air. And the reason that some people kind of associate aircraft disappearing with UFOs is that if UFOs are distorting space and time, that perhaps your airplane could be sucked into some kind of other dimension or into essentially a different time. But yeah, there's never any oil slicks found. There's no official report from the government that concludes what happened to him. It's actually inconclusive. And his case, so it was an interesting case of another modern UAP. And these are the same UAPs. What he described, these hovering lights, is the same thing that numerous pilots report year after year. There's hundreds of sightings of these things by commercial aviation, military pilots, and he seemed to have seen the same thing, except he didn't come. Another example was that in June of 1947, Harold Dahl was out on his boat near Maury Island, Washington. Him and his crew claimed to see a group of 6 donut-shaped UFOs hovering in the sky. One of the objects reportedly malfunctioned, spewing hot metallic debris over the water. The debris allegedly entered Dahl's son and killed his dog. But the story didn't end there. Shortly after Dahl reported the sighting, he was visited by a mysterious figure, one of the earliest known cases of the Men in Black. Essentially, the government was trying to shut him up. So, the Maury Island incident shares a chilling similarity to some of the other cases we've discussed, where the main concern of the government coming in after seeing UFO is that you're not going to tell anybody, especially in like the 50s, 40s, that kind of thing. Anytime during the Cold War, you better keep your mouth shut. Another example is a Shag Harbor UFO incident, which occurred on the night of October 4, 1967. And this is a small fishing village in Nova Scotia. So you have a large glowing object that descends into the waters of the harbor, making this, what was described as like a large whooshing sound, sets off a massive response. The RCMP, police, and the locals go looking for this thing. They knew something was wrong, but they thought maybe it is a crashed aircraft. However, the investigation again yielded zero evidence of any kind of aircraft crash, any kind of object actually being in the ocean. It's like it disappeared into thin air. It's another mysterious case of unidentified flying objects, which seem to dominate, or they're always in our skies. Interestingly enough, the fact that this one going in the ocean, it's important to note that this is also going back, that is consistent with history, is that there's reports of these things not just being from the sky, that they go from the sky into the ocean and they can move underwater as quick as they move in the sky. And there's actually the example out of Iraq where they described a god, his name was Ons, and he was able to come out of the sea in his little sky chariot type thing and do his thing. Shag Harbor is just an example of what people see all the time. It's a good example of what's constantly being filmed off the coast of Florida or even in Norway with the Hesden lights. So there's no shortage of these mysterious balls of light in the sky. And all we're left with is speculation and guessing. Okay, so now that we've covered the timeline of all the different types of cultural memes surrounding UFOs and what people see over the thousands of years of our existence, let's move into what they could be. What could they be? This is my favorite part because it allows me to get a little bit creative, but I promise you, I don't think I have the answer. So the most common underlying theory for UFOs is that they are part of an extraterrestrial culture, race, whatever you want to say. The theory suggests that the UFOs and spacecrafts are piloted by intelligent life from other planets or even dimensions. Many people believe that there are similarities in the reported abductions, strange lights in the sky, lost time, and that essentially this all adds up to extraterrestrial beings visiting Earth to study humans. One of the things that is counter to this claim is the Fermi paradox. I'm not going to get into the Fermi paradox, which is our universe should be teeming with life, but it isn't. It's the fact that we have zero evidence of extraterrestrial life anywhere in the universe right now. And for something to be able to travel any distance to us, they would have to be able to travel interdimensionally, meaning that they'd have to be able to bend space and time to get here, because otherwise we'd see their home planet, their home base, and if they were anywhere close enough to actually travel to us. And so, yeah, they must have some kind of cool technology that can create wormholes, travel through time, you name it. And that would be about the only way I could think of them getting back and forth from Earth. The big theory that I think about a lot of times is that UFOs are actually just advanced human technology. That, sure, there's been these balls of light that we've been seeing since ancient history, but the uptick in what we're seeing nowadays in the more modern meme of the UFO is military aircraft. We've seen in the Cold War that the US were carrying out the development of high altitude air balloons, getting up into the 90s with the development of the stealth bomber. All of these things are done under complete secrecy and are thought to be kind of the blame and the source for what people were seeing and reporting as UFOs. And then you have the government denying their existence, adding fuel to the fire, and take a stealth bomber. It's not showing up on radar again. So what does our mind do? It can't be human. So all of these things, to me, get amplified. And you take the fact that there's such a concentration of UFO and UAP sightings around military technology. Now, this is either a simple explanation saying, okay, like it's just foreign adversaries, it's military testing and probing of each other's capabilities, and of course our militaries have secret aircraft, and that's what we're seeing. Even to the point where there could be like the military could purposely be disguising kind of conventional aircraft as UFOs. It doesn't take much. If it's sunset or dusk, all you got to do is pop a big light onto an airplane, and that's all you can see. You can't see the outline of the plane. You can't see anything but that ball of light. So it's not exactly hard, I'm sure, for the military to pull off disguising their aircraft in any way, shape, or form that they want to. The scary part of that is that it's not military aircraft. It's not from foreign adversaries. And the things that are being spotted consistently more and more around military bases are the same UFOs that have been around since the start of history. And that's scary because the fact that they're starting to look at our military bases and really starting to study our defense capabilities is not a good sign for humans if that's the case, because they're able to travel through time and do all this crazy UFO stuff. They can travel underwater as easily as they can travel in air. Like, we don't stand a chance against them, right? That's the whole point. So if this is some kind of like probing effort that we're seeing, this uptick in UFO activity, which a lot of people say has really started since the nuclear bomb testings, yeah, that could be a scary sign for us. An interesting side note to that is that if the military thinks that these are extraterrestrials probing our military sites, they may want to give off the indication they know absolutely nothing about these things or the threat itself to avoid essentially instigating a attack or invasion from these craft. This is a common military strategy to expedite an invasion of a foreign adversary if you catch wind that they're kind of becoming aware of your intentions. However, that being said, there's zero proof. To me, it would make more sense that aliens or UFOs, that the uptick in sightings on military bases is exactly that, military aircraft. But the one thing doesn't seem to escape any of the explanations is their ability to defy conventional physics. So these things seem to be able to move through air and water without any kind of friction or resistance. They can stop and change directions so fast that if a human was inside one of those machines, they would be liquefied. Some people try to say that, oh, it could just be maybe the military is just creating projections of like lights to make people think that they're seeing UFOs. Again, the reason I don't buy that is because there's so much history of these sightings. So I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that these things exist and that we are seeing them. One of the things that I see repeated time and time again is that why would aliens come down and talk to us? If aliens are here, why would they reveal themselves to us? Which, again, like when I see these UFOs and UAPs stories since the start of history, I don't see evidence of a lot of interactions with humans up until you start getting these alien abductions. And it makes me wonder, like people often say, why would they be interested in us? We're like ants to them. They would be interested in us. We're literally trying to use AI to decode whale and dolphin language. Why would aliens not want to talk to us? If they're interested in our military bases, why would they not? I don't know. Again, it just makes me question that there's actually something inside these things flying around in the sky. So whether or not there's aliens in these things, interdimensional travelers, divine beings, I don't think we're ever going to know. A lot of people think that UFO encounters are strictly rooted in psychological or a neurological phenomenon, that this is coming completely from within people's minds, that it could be linked to things like sleep paralysis, hallucinations, or collective cultural anxiety. The abductions between Travis Walton and the Hills created kind of a meme for people to follow. And now they have these alien abductions, which are very similar to what the Hills and Travis Walton described. So it very well could be, because the whole thing, like I said, the one thing I'm not sold on is any of these alien abductions. Really not. The most fascinating thing, though, I find with all of this that really I want to hone in on is that whether these are aliens or not, I believe that they're there and they're moving in a way that not only can we not explain, but might defy all of our understanding of the universe. If these things are able to travel through time, dimensions, and space in ways that we can't imagine, we better figure it out. We better figure it out quick, because I can't even think of the potential that would unlock for us as a species. Whether it's to travel to places we've never even thought of, or to preserve our species throughout the entire universe. Like, eventually the Earth is going to die off. We're going to have nowhere to live. So maybe it would be a good thing if we were able to escape this planet at some point, or even escape this time. I think the one thing time and time again that we have to remember is that these things very well might be part of an ancient alien or ancient extraterrestrial race. They might be part of an ancient race that existed on Earth, not necessarily outside of Earth. They could be in a parallel dimension to us, like that's able to travel over to ours. But the one thing I want to reiterate that seems to me that there's kind of evidence of is that these things are autonomous. Seems to me that time and time again, there's no indication of aliens actually being inside of these crafts. In the last like 60, 70 years, we've started to say that these things are extraterrestrials and aliens, even coming up with explanations for intergalactic races for different species that are on in these boards. You have the Greys, the Nordics, the Reptilians that seem to be cemented into UFO lore and the public's imagination when it comes to aliens. These aren't things that you saw people talking about in Peru or in India thousands of years ago. What you did see was just an explanation of a flying thing that they thought could be a divine being. The one thing that just seems so consistent over the thousands of years that we've been watching these things fly around the sky, it's that they don't talk to us. They don't interact with us other than zipping in and out, maybe coming close to somebody. That it makes me think these things act more autonomous than they do intelligent. It seems to me that because of that, whatever is controlling them doesn't either have an interest in communicating with us, or the more likely thing that I think it is, they don't exist anymore. For example, today we're creating autonomous vehicles using AI technology. You're making tons of drones that can bomb people all over the world, independent of humans. Now, these run on short-powered fuel cells. We might get a couple hours out of them. But there's no reason that these same aircraft can't be programmed to collect reconnaissance data, right? LiDAR, scans, they could be doing atmospheric testing, you name it. And even with today's technology where we're at with nuclear stuff, we can probably make these things run for decades. And that UFOs that were powered by an advanced race that had the ability to design these things was probably using energy sources that we can't understand. And that could last for thousands of years. That's not to mention that if you're a time traveling or dimensional, like interdimensional race, your concept of time might be so different from what we experience that to make something that lasts 10,000 years might be like making something that lasts 6 hours for them. These power systems that could allow the craft to basically keep operating with whatever it was programmed to do indefinitely isn't that far-fetched, I don't think. And to be honest, like, we're not that far off it outside of figuring out the energy component. The concept in this comes from theoretical physics where, for example, you have the von Neumann probe. And this is an idea where we could create self-replicating autonomous probes that we're going to send out to other galaxies. And in those other galaxies, we're going to collect information and data and send it back to ourselves. That being said, the design of those probes is to be fully autonomous. So we could get blown up by an asteroid or meteorite, and those things are just going to keep on chugging along. Now, you take that one step further, and this is where it gets even creepier because it might explain our origin, but the proposal of essentially sending human DNA in space that could be essentially life created in a petri dish. We can do that now. You would be sending human DNA off to planets and autonomously aboard those spacecraft. They have the ability to start 3D printing cells and things like that and seed our DNA onto new planets so that we as a species will survive, but not as a culture. And that being said, again, if you look at the origins of the human race and everyone tries to explain ancient aliens giving us all this technology and all these things, and it could be the case that these UFOs and UAPs were what brought us here originally. And the reason they've always been around is because we weren't here before them. So, interesting thought. I don't think it's that crazy to think aliens are doing that stuff when we're literally planning on doing the exact same thing to other planets. I can't even explain how many projects are trying to be developed right now. They want to send like tons of these light sails out into other universes, all these autonomous ideas for space travel, because we've realized that our bodies can't get us there, but our machines can. I don't know. Food for thought. So this phenomenon or obsession has been around since literally probably the existence of humans. I don't think it's going away. The one thing that's been consistent for the last thousands of years is that these sightings have been around. And then you have the introduction of all these new phenomena sometime around the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Do with that information what you will. Again, I don't want to muddy the waters on the history part of this because I think that's more interesting. I promised that I'd put myself out there and share my own UFO experience or stories. Honestly, they're mild probably compared to most of the stuff. But both of these happened when I was a teenager. One was about 12 or 13 years old, and I was with my grandfather fishing on Rice Lake in Ontario. And the two of us were watching this bright kind of ball of light that wasn't flashing like other airplanes in the sky, just move left, right, back and forth for about 20 minutes solid. Who knows what it could have been? It was the 90s, so I don't think it was likely a drone. I don't think people were using those quadcopter things. Military might have been back then though. And then another example is when I was 17, camping with my family, and my aunt and I had stayed up a little bit later than everyone else by the fire. And out of nowhere, this giant green disc literally came hovering overhead, but it happened so quickly. It's like I almost can't remember it properly. But the one thing that was so eerie about this thing was the way that it moved was more like a projection. It was completely silent, and it almost seemed like watching it was lagging a little bit. And when I say lagging, I just mean it was leaving like a light trail that was just something about it. All I can say is it just didn't seem natural, and it seemed really weird. I don't know whether it was a craft or projection or just a result of my 17-year-old imagination. But the one interesting thing is that both my aunt and I never said shit to each other, because I don't think either one of us believed what we saw. And it wasn't until 15 years later, I remember talking to her. I'm like, oh, do you ever remember that night we were camping? And yeah, I saw that too. But it was just an interesting phenomenon psychologically that I had seen this thing and I was scared to tell anyone about it for years. So I guess that's just another example of that cultural propaganda of being, you're crazy if you see a UFO, really did sink in with me, because I was scared to say anything until I was an adult and didn't really care as much. Anyhow, that's my little personal antidote of our story of UFOs. Oh my God, I could go on for hours about this. I think I just did, actually. I really want to thank everyone for joining in today. I really hope that was somewhat entertaining for you.